The first cafes and coffee houses, bedtime history script soft, soothing intro tonight. I invite you to find a comfortable place. Perhaps you are lying in bed. Perhaps you are nestled into a favorite chair. Wherever you are, let your body grow still and let your mind drift gently into a calm space. We are going to travel back in time, not to a place of battle or noise, but to a place of warmth, conversation, and the gentle aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Our journey will take us to the first cafes and coffee houses, those quiet, candlelit places where strangers became friends, where news drifted through the air as slowly as steam from a warm cup, and where the modern idea of gathering, talking, and lingering over a drink was born. So, take a slow breath in, and as you exhale, imagine the world softening around you. As we step into the story, Chapter 1, the first whisper of coffee. Long before the clinking of porcelain cups in busy cities, coffee was something quiet and rare. A simple, roasted bean brewed in humble pots over glowing embers. Our story begins not in a cafe, but in the highlands of Ethiopia, where legend tells of a goat herd named Calm. Calm noticed his goats dancing, leaping with unusual energy after eating the red berries of a certain shrub. Curious, he tried the berries himself, and felt an awakening in his mind. The story may be more legend than fact, but from this quiet moment, coffee began its slow journey, from berry to beverage, from hillsides to bustling towns. It would travel by trade routes to Yemen, where monks brewed it to stay awake through long nights of prayer, and from there to the wider Islamic world. Pause, calm tone deepens, and so the stage was quietly set for the birth of the first true coffee houses. Chapter 2, the first coffee houses of the Islamic world. By the mid-15th century, coffee had taken root in Yemen. In the port city of Mecca, the dark drink was brewed in clay pots and poured into small cups. It was strong, bitter, and deeply fragrant. Merchants carried it to the great cities of the Ottoman Empire, and with it, the idea of a special place to drink it. In the bustling city of Constantinople, now Istanbul, the first coffee houses appeared in the 1500s. They were called qahveh, places where the rich aroma filled the air, and the clink of small metal cups marked the passing of hours. Inside, the walls were often lined with carpets and lanterns. Men gathered on low stools, discussing poetry, politics, religion, or simply the small matters of daily life. There were no clocks on the wall. Time moved at the pace of conversation. Outside, the city bustled with merchants and sailors. But inside, the coffee house was a world apart, a place where warmth and thought flowed as steadily as the drink itself. Chapter 3, the atmosphere of an Ottoman coffee house. Inside an Ottoman coffee house, there was a stillness, not a silence, but a calm hum of voices. The air was thick with the scent of roasted beans and sweet smoke from long-stemmed pipes. On some days, a storyteller might sit in a corner, weaving a tale of heroes and far-off lands. On others, a musician might softly pluck the strings of an oud, its notes mingling with the clink of cups. The coffee itself was brewed in small copper pots, called sez. Ground coffee, water, and sometimes sugar simmered together over hot coals, until a dark, foaming liquid rose to the surface. It was poured into tiny, handleless cups, bitter, rich, and thick. It was not a drink to rush. It was something to savor slowly, in sips. As hours drifted by, unnoticed, these coffee houses became known as schools of the wise. Here news spread, ideas flourished, and people lingered long into the night under the soft glow of lanterns. Chapter for the spread to Persia and beyond. From the Ottoman world, coffee houses traveled eastward into Persia. In cities like Isfahan and Shiraz, they became centers not just of conversation, but of art. Persian coffee houses were places of music, of miniature paintings, of poetry recited softly to an attentive crowd. The atmosphere was gentler. Walls painted in blues and golds, the air perfumed with incense. People came not just for coffee, but for companionship and the pleasure of being part of a slow, thoughtful world. Chapter 5. Venice and the first European cafés. The early 1600s, coffee had crossed the seas. Ships from the Ottoman Empire brought sacks of beans to the busy port of Venice. At first, the drink was exotic and strange, sold in apothecaries as a kind of medicinal tonic. But soon, the first European cafés opened. Bright, lively spaces compared to the dim, lantern-lit houses of the East. Venetian cafés had windows that looked onto busy streets, where merchants and travelers passed by. The interiors were filled with polished wood, marble counters, and the gentle clink of porcelain cups. Here, too, conversation flowed, but the style was different. In Venice, coffee houses became a place for business deals, for merchant gossip, and for hearing the latest news from across the Mediterranean. Chapter 6. The calf culture of Paris. From Venice, coffee traveled north, through trade routes, across mountains and rivers, until it reached the heart of France. In Paris, the first café opened in 1686. It was called Café Procope, a place that would become famous not only for its coffee, but for the great thinkers and writers who gathered there. The café was softly lit with candles, its walls lined with mirrors and paintings. Small marble tables were set close together, encouraging quiet conversation. The clientele included philosophers, playwrights, and poets. Voltaire, Diderot, and Rousseau all spent long hours here, sipping coffee and discussing ideas that would echo through history. But despite these famous names, the café was not a place of hurried debate. It was slow, thoughtful, the sound of words blending gently with the steady rhythm of spoons stirring in porcelain cups. Chapter 7. London's penny universities. Around the same time, coffee houses appeared in London. Here, they became known as penny universities. For the price of a single penny, one could buy a cup of coffee, and with it, access to conversation, news, and ideas. These coffee houses were lively, filled with merchants, writers, and politicians. Newspapers were read aloud, letters exchanged, and debates carried out in a spirited yet measured tone. The interiors were simpler than those of Paris. Wooden benches, long shared tables, and chalkboards with the day's news or exchange rates. Written in a careful hand, coffee was served black, bitter, and without the sugar and cream that would become common later. It was a drink for thought and alertness, not for sweetness. Chapter 8. The art of lingering across cultures, from Constantinople to Paris to London. One thing was shared. The coffee house was not a place to rush. People lingered over their cups for hours, sometimes in deep conversation, sometimes in companionable silence. The pace of life inside was different. The outside world might be hurried, but here time slowed. Even today, in the oldest cafés, you can feel this same quiet rhythm, as if the walls themselves remember centuries of soft voices and the steady, gentle act of sipping coffee. Chapter 9. Vienna and the coffee house. Tradition. After the late 17th century, coffee reached the heart of Central Europe. Vienna, with its grand architecture and winding streets, became home to some of the most elegant cafes in the world. The story is often told that coffee arrived in Vienna after the Battle of Vienna in 1683, left behind by retreating Ottoman forces. Whether this tale is fact or legend, the city embraced the drink warmly. Viennese cafes were spacious and refined, tables covered in white cloth, chandeliers overhead, and tall windows looking out onto quiet boulevards. Here, coffee was often served with cream and a small piece of pastry, a gentle pairing that would become part of the city's tradition. Writers, musicians, and artists gathered here. Johann Strauss might stop for coffee after a concert, or a poet might linger by a window, notebook in hand, as the snow fell softly outside. Chapter 10. The qahveh as a second home in Vienna, the café became more than just a place to drink coffee. It became almost a second home. Some guests would stay for hours, reading newspapers supplied by the café. Others would write letters or simply sit quietly, watching the life of the city pass outside. The staff came to know their regular guests, bringing coffee just the way they liked it, and sometimes even keeping a favorite table ready. The atmosphere was gentle, with the faint sound of a piano or violin drifting through the air. It was not uncommon to see a chessboard set up in a corner, two players leaning in, their moves unhurried. This was the rhythm of the Viennese café, unhurried, familiar, a world that seemed untouched by time. Chapter 11. The Enlightenment and the exchange of ideas. As the 18th century moved forward, coffeehouses became more than social spaces. They became places of thought, of philosophy, of exchange. In Paris, the Enlightenment philosophers gathered in cafes to discuss new ideas. In London, pamphlets and political writings were read aloud in busy coffeehouses. In Vienna, composers met patrons over cups of steaming coffee. These were not hurried meetings, but slow, thoughtful conversations. Ideas took time to brew, just as the coffee did. It is no exaggeration to say that revolutions of thought were born in these cafes, but in the quiet way that a seed grows in the soil, unseen, until the moment it takes root. Chapter 12. The 19th century and the golden age of cafes, the Shujoth century. Cafes had become an essential part of urban life. In Paris, Vienna, Prague, and beyond, they were woven into the daily rhythm of the city. The Industrial Revolution had changed much of the world outside, but inside the cafes, the pace was unhurried. In Paris, the grand boulevards were lined with cafes, their glass doors opening onto terraces, where people sat for hours, watching the passing carriages, or the slow shift of afternoon light across the street. Inside, marble-topped tables stood in neat rows. Mirrors multiplied the glow of chandeliers, while waiters in crisp waistcoats moved gracefully between tables. The café had become a place for everyone, writers and painters, merchants and clerks, lovers and friends, all sharing the same slow moments over coffee. Chapter 13. The qahveh as a place of art. In the 1800s, cafes became more than just social spaces. They became places of art. In Paris, painters like Manet, Renoir, and Degas often depicted cafe scenes, capturing the light, the stillness, and the subtle human moments that unfolded there. Some cafes even displayed works of art on their walls. A young painter could hang a canvas where patrons might see it, perhaps selling it to a sympathetic customer. The café was a meeting place for artists. Sketchbooks rested on tables beside cups of coffee. Small discussions about color or light drifted between friends. The world outside might be hurried, but inside, the pace of creation was unhurried. Ideas flowing like warm steam from a freshly poured cup. Chapter 14. Vienna and the Qahveh Society. Meanwhile, in Vienna, the coffeehouse culture flourished even more. By the late 1800s, the city had hundreds of cafes, each with its own character. Some were grand and formal. Others were quiet and intimate, known for their reading rooms or resident musicians. Writers often took a table for the entire day, ordering one cup of coffee and letting it sit beside them as they wrote page after page. The staff expected this. The cafe was not a place for turnover. It was a place for staying. In some newspapers from across Europe were hung on wooden holders so that guests could read the latest news from Paris, London, or Berlin. The Vienna Café was both a private refuge and a public stage, a world of quiet observation. Chapter 15. Belle Epoque, Paris, and the Qahveh Terrace. The turn of the century in Paris brought the Belle Epoque, a time of elegance, art, and quiet sophistication. Along the wide boulevards, designed by Baron Haussmann, cafes spilled out onto the sidewalks. Terraces lined with small round tables and wicker chairs became a signature sight. Here Parisians sat beneath striped awnings, watching the passing world, horse-drawn carriages, flower vendors, and the glow of gas lamps as evening settled in. The café terrace was as much a stage as it was a refuge, a place to be seen, to quietly observe, or simply to linger, letting the soft hum of the city become part of the moment. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, the scent of coffee mingling with the faint aroma of fresh pastries. Chapter Chaulieu, the writers' cafes of Montparnasse in the early 20th century. Paris became the home of writers and artists from around the world. Many of them gathered in the cafes of Montparnasse. Cafes like La Rotonda and La Dime became legendary. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Picasso all spent hours there, sharing ideas, sketching, or simply watching life pass by from their favorite tables. The cafes were a mixture of noise and quiet voices in different languages. Laughter, the sound of cups and spoons, but also long pauses where someone might be lost in thought, looking out the window at the rain-soaked streets. Even for these famous names, the cafe was a place of stillness, a place where creativity had room to grow slowly. Chapter 17. The Viennese Qahveh. In the early 20th century, Vienna's cafes also continued to thrive in the early 1900s, even as the world changed. Inside the coffeehouses, life kept its slower rhythm. Some cafes became centers for music. Composers might work quietly at a table, sketching a new melody in the corner. Others became gathering places for thinkers and scientists. Sigmund Freud himself was known to frequent cafes, reading, writing, and discussing ideas over cups of coffee. The furniture remained much the same. Marble tables, bentwood chairs, and high ceilings echoing softly with the sound of conversation. Chapter 18. The interwar years and the Qahveh as refuge after the First World War. Europe was a quieter, more reflective place. In the 1920s and 30s, cafes became sanctuaries. Some people came to forget the war. Others came to find a sense of normalcy. In Paris, Vienna, Prague, and Budapest, the cafe remained a constant, a place that felt familiar even when the world outside was uncertain. In Paris, the terrace culture continued, but there was a new sense of introspection. A single coffee could last all afternoon, in Vienna. The interiors stayed much the same. Tall windows, polished marble tables, the faint scent of pipe smoke in the air. The cafe was a steady presence, a gentle reminder of what remained unchanged. Chapter. Shuzhou, the caf during World War I. During the Second World War, cafes took on different roles. Some continued to operate quietly, serving coffee to locals trying to keep daily life alive. Others became places of whispered conversation. In occupied cities, a cafe table might hold both a cup of coffee and secret messages hidden beneath a saucer. But even in these tense years, the cafe was still a place where people could pause, if only for a short moment, and feel something close to normal life. The hum of conversation was softer, the atmosphere more subdued, but the coffee still steamed, and the familiar scent still filled the air. Chapter 20. Post-war revival and the spirit of hope after. The war cafes came back to life. In the late 1940s and 50s, terraces were once again full. In Paris, the post-war years saw a new wave of writers and philosophers gather in cafes. Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir at Café de Flore, Albert Camus at Les Deux Magots, their conversations spilling softly over cups of dark coffee. In Italy, the espresso machine became a new symbol of cafe life. The hiss of steam and the aroma of strong coffee filled small bars and elegant city cafes alike. Cafes once again became places of optimism, spaces where the future felt full of possibility. Chapter 21. The 1960s and the bohemian spirit. In the 1960s, cafes took on a new kind of life. They became meeting places for poets, musicians, and a new generation of thinkers. In Paris, the left bank cafes filled with students and artists. In London, small coffee bars played jazz records, the music drifting out onto the street. In America, coffeehouses became linked to the folk music revival. Dimly lit rooms with wooden chairs and a small stage hosted singers with guitars. While the scent of coffee drifted gently through the air, though styles had changed, the essence of the cafe was the same, a place to gather, to share ideas, and to linger over a warm cup. Chapter 22. The 1970s and Everyday Caf Life by the Ejo Teeling S. Cafes had become part of everyday city life across much of the world. From Paris to Rome to San Francisco, people stopped for their morning coffee, or lingered over an afternoon cup. Espresso bars in Italy buzzed with the sound of steaming milk and clinking cups. In France, the terraces were filled with sunlight, as waiters carried trays of coffee, sometimes accompanied by a glass of mineral water. The cafe was no longer a place only for artists or philosophers. It was for everyone, a place for a short break or a long, unhurried conversation. Chapter 23. The 1980s and the global coffee culture. In the 1980s, coffee culture began to spread even more widely. Italian-style espresso bars appeared in cities across the world. Cappuccinos, lattes, and mochas became familiar words. Some cafes still held onto old traditions. In Vienna, marble tables and chandeliers remained unchanged. In Paris, the same. Terraces continued to watch over the same streets. But new styles also emerged. Modern cafes with bright interiors and glass counters offered a fresh take on the timeless ritual, even as coffee became more global. The simple act of sitting down with a cup remained a quiet constant. Chapter 24. The 1990s and the rise of the modern coffee chain. In the 1990s, a new wave of cafes began to appear. Large, Comfortable spaces with soft chairs and warm lighting invited people to stay for hours. These modern coffee chains appeared in cities all over the world. They offered a familiar menu: cappuccinos, lattes, and seasonal flavors. People could order the same drink in New York, London, or Tokyo. The atmosphere was casual. A place to meet a friend, work quietly on a laptop, or simply enjoy a coffee while watching life outside the window. Though the style was new, the spirit was familiar. It was still about creating a space for pause, a place where time could slow for just a little while. Chapter 25: The 2000s and the specialty coffee movement. By the 2000s, coffee culture began to shift again. A new wave of cafes focused on the quality of the beans, the precision of the brewing, and the care taken in every cup. Baristas became artisans, explaining the origin of the beans, the roast, and the flavors to expect. The interiors were often minimalist: wooden tables, soft light, and the quiet hum of conversation. Cafes once again became places for slowing down, where a single cup might be savored slowly, much like in the earliest coffeehouses centuries before. Chapter 26: The present day and the timeless cafeteau day. Cafes are everywhere, from quiet side streets to busy airports, from old historic coffeehouses to sleek modern spaces, and yet the essence remains unchanged. A cafe is still a place to pause, a place to meet, to think, or to simply enjoy the quiet moment between sips. Whether it is an ancient khaneh in Istanbul, a grand cafe in Vienna, or a small neighborhood coffee shop, the spirit is the same. The world outside moves quickly, but inside, time is just a little slower. Chapter 27: A gentle reflection as we look back over the centuries. From the highlands of Ethiopia to the quiet cafes of today, one thing is clear. The cafe has always been more than a place to drink coffee. It has been a space for people, a space for conversation, for thought, for creativity, and for the simple pleasure of sitting still in the 1500s. It was a small coffeehouse in Constantinople, lit by lanterns, where men gathered on low stools. In the 1600s, it was Venice, with its marble counters and merchants trading news. In the 1700s, it was Paris and London, where philosophers spoke softly over porcelain cups. In the 1800s, it was Vienna, with its chandeliers and quiet regulars reading newspapers, and today it might be the cafe just down the street, still carrying the same spirit, still offering the same gentle pause in the flow of time. Chapter 28: A quiet evening in a timeless café. Imagine yourself in a cafe, not in any particular time, but in a place where all the centuries meet. The air is warm. There is the gentle aroma of coffee, the soft murmur of voices, and the faintest notes of music from somewhere in the distance. You are sitting at a small table. In front of you is a cup of coffee, the surface steaming gently. You take a slow sip, the warmth spreads through you, and you feel completely at ease. Outside the window, the city, whichever city it may be, moves at its own pace. But here, inside this cafe, time is unhurried, peaceful, still. Chapter 29: Drifting. Toward resters, the evening deepens, the cafe grows quieter. The cups are empty, the conversations softer. You can hear the faint sound of chairs being moved, and the soft clink of porcelain being gathered. Outside, the lights of the city glow gently, as if they, too, are winding down. You take one last slow sip, feeling the warmth settle in you. And as you rise from your table, You know the cafe will still be here tomorrow, and the day after, as it has been for centuries. For now, you step out into the calm night, carrying the stillness of the cafe with you. Chapter 30. The story fades. Then so, our journey through the first cafes and coffee houses comes to a close. From ancient hillsides to modern streets, the cafe has always offered the same gentle gift, a pause in time as you rest now. Perhaps you can imagine that soft hum of conversation, the warm glow of lantern light, and the comfort of a warm cup in your hands. Let those images drift softly in your mind as you close your eyes and let the story fade, like the last notes of music in a quiet cafe at night. Chapter 31. A quiet morning in Istanbul. Day begins softly in an old Istanbul coffee house. The sun has just risen over the Bosphorus, casting a pale golden glow through the windows. Inside, the cafe is calm. The first guests arrive slowly, taking their usual seats without hurry. A waiter in a crisp vest sets down small copper pots over gentle coals. The coffee brews slowly, its surface bubbling softly. The smell fills the room, rich, earthy, and slightly sweet. On a nearby table, two men play backgammon, the gentle click of dice blending with the soft hum of conversation. Outside, the city stirs to life, but here, inside, the rhythm is steady, unchanged for centuries. Chapter 32. A rainy afternoon in Paris. The rain falls in a fine mist. The cobblestones glisten softly, and the cafe terrace is dotted with small round tables beneath striped awnings. Inside, the room is warm. Candles flicker in tall brass holders, and the sound of rain tapping gently on the windows blends with the soft clink of cups. A poet sits by the window, writing in a small notebook. A couple shares a quiet conversation at a nearby table, leaning in close, smiling softly. The waiter moves gracefully, carrying a tray with tiny cups of espresso and fresh croissants. Outside, the rain continues, but here inside, the world feels sheltered and calm. Chapter 33. Winter in Vienna. In winter is a picture of stillness. Snow falls softly over the city, settling on rooftops, quieting the streets. Inside the grand cafe, the windows are slightly frosted. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over white tablecloths. Guests arrive with scarves and gloves, shaking off the cold before sitting down. Coffee is served with cream and small slices of sachertorte, the rich chocolate a perfect companion to the winter day. A pianist plays quietly in the corner, the notes mingling with the soft murmur of conversation. The cafe feels warm, timeless, protected from the cold just beyond its doors. Chapter 34. A summer afternoon in Venice. The canals of Venice glimmer in the afternoon sun. Gondolas glide slowly over the water, the air warm, carrying the faint sound of a violin from somewhere across the square. On Piazza San Marco, the cafes are alive with a gentle hum. Marble tables line the shaded arcades, where guests sit beneath fluttering white umbrellas. A waiter in a crisp white jacket sets down tiny cups of espresso, alongside small glasses of cold water. The air carries the scent of coffee, fresh pastries, and the sea. Time moves slowly here. The bells of St. Mark's ring softly in the distance, marking another hour of this golden afternoon. Chapter 35. Autumn in London. Autumn brings a different kind of cafe life. The streets are lined with yellow and brown leaves, and the air holds a crisp chill. Inside a quiet coffee house, The wooden tables are worn smooth by years of use. A chalkboard on the wall lists the day's specials. Men in long coats hang their hats and settle in. Outside, the light fades early. Through the windows, gas lamps flicker to life, casting a warm glow on the damp cobblestones. A cup of coffee here feels like shelter from the season, a small comfort against the cool air waiting beyond the door. Chapter 36. A Timeless Night. And then, there is the night cafe, not bound to any one city or time. The room is quiet, lit by soft lamps that glow like small moons. There are only a few guests left. A solitary figure at the far end of the room writes slowly in a notebook. Another stirs their coffee, lost in thought. Outside, the street is nearly empty. The sound of footsteps echoes faintly, then fades into silence. Inside, the air feels still, suspended in a moment that could belong to any century. Chapter 37. The Imaginary Travel Café Magine. A cafe that does not exist on any single street. A cafe not bound by one city, or even one century. You push open its wooden door and step inside. At first, it feels familiar, the soft glow of lamps, the warm scent of coffee. But as you look around, you notice something unusual in one corner. A man in Ottoman robes stirs coffee over hot coals, just as they did in Istanbul centuries ago. Nearby, a Venetian merchant in silk clothing leans over a marble counter, discussing trade as the bells of San Marco ring faintly in the air. Across the room, a Parisian poet from the 1800s writes slowly in a leather notebook, while, not far away, a Viennese pianist plays a quiet tune, fingers gliding over the keys. It is as if every cafe in history has gathered here, blended together in one timeless room. Chapter 38. Conversations across time. You take a seat at a small, round table. The chair feels worn, as if many guests have sat there before you. The voices around you are soft. A philosopher in a powdered wig debates quietly with a modern barista. An artist from 1920s Montparnasse sketches a gondola he's only just seen, thanks to a Venetian guest sitting nearby. Time here does not move in a straight line. Every century feels as if it is happening at once. Your coffee arrives, but it is not from any one place. It tastes like all the cafes you visited in. This journey, rich, smooth, and full of quiet history. Chapter 39. The calf beyond timers. The evening deepens. The conversations grow softer. The pianist continues playing, the notes drifting like slow waves through the room. Outside the windows, there is no street, only a soft golden mist, as if this cafe floats gently between worlds. The guests seem unhurried. No one checks the time. No one is in a rush to leave. You realize this cafe will always be here, waiting for you to return whenever you wish, to step away from the noise of the world. For now, you take another sip of your coffee, letting the warmth stay with you as the night grows still. Chapter 40. The last cup in the eternal café. The golden light inside the café has grown softer, as if the lamps know that night is deepening around you. The guests are still at ease. The Ottoman coffee maker stirs his final pot. The Venetian merchant rolls up his maps. The Parisian poet closes his notebook, and the Viennese pianist plays one last, gentle melody. Your own cup is nearly empty now. The last sip is warm and rich, carrying with it the flavor of centuries. You look around the room one more time, every table holding a fragment of history, every voice a whisper from another age. You know this cafe will always be here, waiting. In the quiet space between moments, whenever you wish to return. Chapter 41. Stepping outside, you rise from your table, moving slowly toward the cafe door. As you step outside, the golden mist wraps gently around you. The air is warm, and you can hear the faintest echo of piano music following you softly like a memory. The street beyond is quiet. It could be Paris, or Venice, or Vienna, or perhaps it is none of them, a place beyond all of them. You take a deep breath, feeling peaceful. Every cafe you have visited still lingers in your mind, like the gentle aftertaste of a perfect cup of coffee. Chapter 42. The night carries you home. You begin to walk slowly, the golden mist guiding you forward. The streets grow quieter. The light grows softer, and your thoughts become slower, calmer. The cafes you visited, Istanbul, Venice, Paris, Vienna, and all the rest, feel as if they are settling gently in your memory. There is no hurry now, no noise, just the soft, steady rhythm of your steps and the lingering peace of the cafe somewhere in the distance. You can almost hear the promise of morning. But for now, the night will carry you home. Chapter 43. The gentle farewell of the qahveh golden mist fades softly behind you, but the warmth of the cafe remains in your heart. You can still picture it clearly. The copper pots, the marble counters, the quiet terraces, the sound of porcelain cups being placed gently on tables. Each cafe you visited seems to whisper a small farewell, a soft promise that it will still be there whenever you wish to return. The echoes of voices grow fainter, like music drifting away over water, until all that remains is quiet. Chapter 44. The quiet street of dreams. You find yourself walking down a quiet street now. It is lined with old lampposts, each one casting a pool of warm light on the cobblestones. The windows of the buildings are dark, except for the occasional soft glow from a small cafe tucked into the corner. As you pass by, you see a single steaming cup left on a table inside, as if waiting for someone who will arrive tomorrow. Or perhaps someone who was just here a moment ago. The air is still, the night feels safe, and your steps grow slower, easier. Chapter 45. Drifting into rest, you reach the end of the street. There is no door, no wall, only a soft golden horizon. The warmth of the cafes, the gentle music, the quiet conversations, all fade into a peaceful silence. You feel as though you were settling into the most comfortable chair, the kind that holds you perfectly. Your breathing slows, your thoughts drift gently, and the cafes of history settle quietly in your mind, like pages closing softly in an old book. The story has ended, but the calm remains, wrapping around you like a blanket as you drift into rest.